ministers, I like to talk, so we should get going. Okay, first, a couple things. I'm so used to having a thing on. So this stage really suits my desire to be a thespian and the queen for the day. And we all do our own little kind of dance, and when we live authentically, we really, I love that song because it brings a lot of emotion up, but it just reminds us to live as our true self each and every moment. So our talk today is really personalize the infinite, but understanding that there appears to be a duality within us, but there really isn't. But for appearance purposes, we have to know the difference between the two so that we can traverse this human life of ours and go from this to this, right? I have to remember to keep this, but really it brings us to the embodiment that we are already all that we seek. I'm known for a couple things. Purple hair, which I don't have today because I didn't go to the hairdresser, but this matches me really well. And jokes. So I do have a joke for you. All right, so a woman has a heart attack, and during this, she dies and meets God. She says to God, "Will I die? Will I go back to earth?" And God said, "No, you will not die. You will go back and live another 40 years, 2 months, and 8 days." At an instant, she snapped back alive. After the heart attack, she decides to make the most improvements of her life. She gets a facelift, liposuction, a tummy tuck. She even gets surgery to change the color of her hair. And her final surgery, she walks out and gets hit by a car and dies. When she goes to heaven and meets God, she says, "What was that?" And he said, "What? You died." And she said, "You said I'd live another 40 years. And oh, God said, "I didn't recognize you." I didn't recognize you. Did not recognize you. I'm sorry if you can't hear me. Thank you. All right. So when we change, we become unrecognizable. When we move from what I call the special self, the ego self, the self that we're really born into, the self that we cultivate as we move along and traverse life. The conditionings of life add unto us. It's really the story of the prodigal son. We go out, we live, and if you're like me, you live really good. And then one day you decide, man, this isn't any fun anymore. And we start to recognize that there's something much deeper that's calling us. In my case, I lost my job, and then I lost another job, and I could hear God knocking. "Wake up, Tracey, there's so much more for you than working at a bank for 30 years. Let's go." And I really wanted to know God deeply. And as I've walked this path, I've recognized that I wanted to know him since what I could trace back to the 5th grade. And so I was raised a good Catholic girl. And I remember my mom put me in Sunday school around the 5th grade, and the 2 Sunday school teachers were very charismatic, in disguise, charismatic Christians who decided to teach Sunday school and try to convert some 5th graders. You can imagine how those parents felt. But I remember they took us to this big charismatic thing where people were talking in tongues, and I just remember going, this is very odd, but I became a Bible carrier in the 5th grade, and I really started to develop my relationship with God then. But of course, we have parents, and they want you to do it their way, so that's okay. So then life happened, and I ended up here. End of story. Surrender, talk's over. Don't you wish it was that easy for ministers, right? And so what I call the Great Awakening, Ernest Holmes does have a chapter, and he says something like this about the Great Awakening. "I am the light of the world." Jesus was not referring to his human personality, but to the principle inherent in generic man. "They who follow this inner principle shall have the light of life, for this principle is life." So moving from what I call the ego self, the special self, in Course of Miracles, David Hoffmeister says something like this. He says that when creating a union of truth, honesty, forgiveness, and holy love, it is essential to understand the difference between special relationship from a holy one. Now he's talking about, I did a wedding and I based the whole wedding on that. But what I recognize, the deeper meaning that struck me in that is the special self and the ego self, the relationship we have within our own being. That we can't really, and there isn't really anyone outside of us, for the world always appears to us as we believe it should. So when things come back to us and come back to us and come back to us in the same way in different forms with the different people, the common denominator is us, right? So we must then begin to recognize, some changes need to take place within us. And it usually, if the calling or the yearning is deep enough, it will bring us to a place like science of mind or religious science, centers for spiritual enrichment. We've evolved, right, in our name. But it brings us to these deep, profound principles that there is only one. And that one I like to call the holy self. And the holy self encompasses the special self. It's a transformation of lower energies to a higher cause. When I first started writing this talk, and I've had it has not let me go since the idea set upon me from the wedding. And I've gone through different iterations of this talk within my own being that as of a couple months ago, I was trying to transform my conditioning because I thought that my conditioning was what was keeping me from God. The ways that we're raised and the ways that we're maybe unkind or whatever we've learned on our life. And my beautiful teacher, Glory G., who attends the Center of Spiritual Living in Alabama, reminded me recently, Tracey, your conditioning is who you are. It's your identity. And you must fall in love with that as much as you think you've fallen in love with God to become this instead of this. And it is one of the last steps that we must go back and fall in love with the special self, the self that we're normally running from when we arrive at a place like this, the self that we're trying to get rid of, the self that we want to forget, the self we want to forgive. And you recognize that you start to do this when the relationships outside of you start to transform by the renewal of your mind. I recently had a conversation with my mom, and in my history of living quite well, I had a daughter at 16, which you can imagine created quite a stir in my family. And I put that daughter up for adoption, and I was quite angry at my mom for a long time. And I don't know what I was angry at over a period of time. She's now 40, my daughter, and I have met her, and we've built a relationship, and that in itself comes with a particular type of healing. But in this relationship with my mother, I used to sit with her as the special self. You did this. You said this. You didn't listen. You made me do this. And there was never a room for my mother to have her, you did this. You disappointed me. You got pregnant. And what I recognized in this holy talk that we had was that when we are in our special self, it is always, when I get that, I will be. When I get my mother to listen to me, I will be happy. When I get that job, I will be happy. When I get that house, I will be happy. And don't get me wrong, all of these things are wonderful, and there's good in the world and you ought to have it. But if you are relying on that for your happiness, you're missing the point of living by principle. So in the special self, it is me, my needs, fill me up, and then I'll be happy. And what we recognize is the karma of life. The wheel is always spinning, right? And that the nature of life in the special self is impermanent, that people come and go. Life comes and goes, right? Everything, that there is nothing in the objective world that come and goes. It is meant for your enjoyment. It is meant for your character to play. It is meant to meet all these people on your path, on our path, so that we can see the areas that we need to transform and transmute to move into the holy self, to live an even better life than your mind or mind could possibly have imagined for you. So when we know that all objective things come and go, and the impermanent nature of life, this is where sadness, frustration comes in. We lose a child, we give one up for adoption, again, the job, and then all of these feelings come up for us to look at. And if you're like me, you're really good at running away from them. You're really good at going, turning to God to look for healing from the feeling, but the feeling is what's pointing you back to God. So we have to learn to take in these feelings, see what they have for us, so that it can deliver to us the holy self, the self that is always in tune to the world, because it is the thing that brings you your greatest desire. But the thing about the special self, the ego self, is we can't always tell when we're living in it. We usually can tell when we meet somebody that pushes our buttons, and we react, and we go, you, or whatever the case may be. Blame, shame, fear, and guilt arise in us when we meet that beautiful gift on the path of life to show us that we have more work to do. And again, I don't know about you, but I don't really like that gift all the time. And I get caught up in wanting this person not to think this about me. So then the special self goes to work trying to change the mind of that other person instead of their own mind, my own mind. And then we become codependent. We become enablers and sometimes annihilators, right? Of the other person. We want them so much to see who we truly want to be, when they are just there to show us who we truly are. We just have this one little subconscious, sometimes conscious belief that is preventing us from transforming to the holy self. So the holy self, by contrast, does not bring emptiness, lack, or need. It is a sense of wholeness and fulfillment. It is internal validation and inner contentment. It's a holy relationship within yourself. You are God, individualized. And to the mind, that's a bunch of malarkey, right? Because the mind says, well, go ahead and part that sea. Let's see how that works for you. Go ahead and try to walk on water. Let's see how that works for you. But they're all analogies about the power of God, Spirit. And when your mind clears, when mind calms down, and the sense of peace comes that is already present, you become vibrationally in tuned to your higher self, and that everything the moment needs for that person that you have conflict with comes into picture. And you say, how can I? You say, what do you need? You say, let me understand. The holy self arrives. It doesn't say that what happened or what transpired, because in life we can have some pretty difficult and damaging things. Like, the world is a big planet hurling through space, and things happen because a lot of us are asleep, and a lot of us are moving and having our being from our special place instead of from our holy space. And our special being is walking around trying to get everybody changed to make me happy. And so when we vibratorily connect to someone who can show this, sometimes they're not very nice and they do very unkind things. But what we begin to see is hurt people. And we are here because we want to be the people that bring healing to the planet through us. But if we don't heal here first, how can we even think about going out? The peace, right? Full peace has to be here, which it already is, but we have to learn to recognize it. The holy self is about shifting the vision. It's about changing yourself. It is not about changing yourself for another. It is accepting yourself just as you are, all of your history. I mean, I don't know. You know, my mom's 90, and I love her. I love you, Mom, if you're watching. But having a baby at 16 wasn't her idea of what she wanted for her daughter. And, you know, we were sitting on the patio, and usually we get into a big argument about this because, you know, I really wanted her to see that I was in a lot of pain, and I didn't feel like she was there for me. And something happened in this conversation, and I could tell it was a different conversation. It was a holy conversation because we heard each other. And I said to her, "Oh, you hear me for the first time." And she opened up like she had never opened up before. So her holy self met my holy self in a moment, and there was a healing that happened. And a couple days later, she called me and she said, "You know, that was the best conversation. I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel shamed. I didn't feel guilty." And she said, "I felt that you didn't either." And I said, "You know, Mom, I know, and I missed you. And now that I like you more, you can come to coffee. Please come over more, you know." So, but my point is that when we listen with the ego self, we are looking for self-intention. We are looking for the way that it will serve us. And when we are talking about the holy self, the self that is already there, these two are one, but there is a slight difference. One is of mind and one is of heart. So when we move from the head to the heart, we open to see the pain and suffering of others. Fish was telling me a story about somebody in her life that was having a difficult time. And I thought, how beautiful if through this difficult time, instead of trying to tell them they were having a difficult time or to fix the difficult time, we asked them, in this moment, if the Holy Self showed up, they would say, "Well, what can you do? How did you feel? That must have been so painful for you." Not try to tell them how they feel, but to ask them. The Holy Self gets you to go inward. There is nothing a question can't answer that love can't respond with. Holy self, it's shifting a vision. It's accepting yourself. It's moving into holy union. It's staying in this space more than the ego space. And as we traverse and we study and we live the science of mind principles, there are many ways, but we are tuned to the science of mind principles. This is why we're here. We love them. They start to take hold and work within us in a way that we could never have imagined. You do not need to do anything other than read, meditate. You don't even really need to do these things. Your intention about life is the thing that moves and has its way with you. Your attitude or state of mind. Fish and I are trying intermittent fasting. And, we've tried a lot of things as friends through our 13 years of friendship. But our attitude towards this time is so much different because it is about approaching it from the holy self, approaching it for a way of being that creates health in our bodies, right? So you can see through this conversation with my mom, through the recognition that as we try to better ourselves, that really we don't have to take action, we just have to have intention. An intention of a union with the beloved divine within yourself. And it will show you, if you ask, what you need to do to be more of the holy self than the special self. Okay? So Ernest Holmes says this, and he meant it about a home, but when people say home to me, they are talking about this. When Mr. Rogers would sing A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I always thought he was talking about me, my body, not the neighborhood, because there is no neighborhood. There is only you, and you see the world in which the way you feel about yourself. And so if someone's coming up in contrast to you, you just need to look here and go, oh, there's something that I still need to forgive. And what I realized about my daughter was I needed to forgive myself for getting pregnant. I didn't need that from my mother. I was ashamed. And when I healed that within myself, the whole world opened up for me to have a relationship with life, with God, with myself. And I don't mind sharing my personal stories because as a minister, I'm human. And how can you relate to a story because you have your own, right? And so if I can share something that I went through in my life, to help you. I love being authentic that way. So I will share this with you. The atmosphere of home should never be clouded with uncertainties of the outside world. Here, in the place of human love, all else should be forgotten, and an atmosphere maintained which will be a shelter from the world. Here, love should be the ruling passion, and harmony should reign supreme. Here, above all other places, should the kingdom of God reign supreme. Here, within the heart. In AA, they have 12 principles. You'll know you're on track if you can follow these 12 principles because they align to science of mind and to general love. And so my friend Mark, who I did his wedding, realigned these a little bit. So I want to share them with you, and then we will close. You're going to know a new freedom, a new happiness in the Holy Self. You will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. You will welcome it in and usher it home. You will comprehend the word serenity. It will become you. You will know peace until you become peace. No matter how far down the scale you have gone, you will see how your experience can benefit others. The feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear with the special self, and the holy self will make it whole. You will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in your fellow man. Self-seeking will slip away. Your whole attitude and outlook on life will change. You will become exuberant, magnetic. You will be charismatic. You will smile. People will want to be around you. Fear of people and economic security will leave you. There is no such thing. When you are in the holy self, all that you need is given unto you. Fear of people, I apologize, we read that one. You will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle you. I mean, that's the hard one, right? When we're dealing with these people that bring contrast. I don't know you, but I can easily get stuck in the mind trying to change them, trying to get them to see my point of view instead of listening to the pain from which they're speaking to me from, so that I can be the center of peace and love and the holiness that God is to all of my fellow man. Then you will suddenly realize that God is doing for you what you could not do for yourself. And you will bring you to your higher self. I mean, these words, they're so hard to express because you're not brought to your higher self. You are your higher self. But you do transform from a special self to a holy self. And as you study more, as you spend more time in the silence, it becomes you. It radiates from you. The mind calms. Silence is the witness to all of eternity. And that is who you truly are. You are the embodiment of love. Therefore, peace, joy, beauty, clarity, peace radiate from you like a blossoming flower on a beautiful spring afternoon. And that we will close. Thank you so much. Would you like me to pray us out? Okay, thank you. As we just know the perfection, the divine, the beautiful life that we have, that we can taste, sense. We use our senses to move through this world, but we use our heart to open to it. That we invite in the recognition of the holy self, that it is the fire that sets us ablaze to traverse this life like the prodigal son coming home. And the doors open to us. Life, love, beauty, peace, joy. This is our natural state. Someone lied to us and told him it was the ego self, but it's just an illusion. And when we learn this in our mind, it transforms our heart, and we step into this role easily and profoundly. The reality of life opens to us like we have never seen it before. That I claim this now, here, and for everybody watching, and for this room and out of these walls. This magnetic attunement will take you into your week, and you will shine for those who are in pain and need to see the truth. You are the truth bearer. Be that light that you are. Ask a good question to reveal the truth of love and honesty from your own heart out, and watch the life change. This is God's promise to us, as us, in us, and through us. I am so grateful to be on this stage to share these words, to know that God has planted a seed in someone's heart to open wide to the universe and all it has to offer, that our vibration has risen and touched the stars and come back and transformed who we are. I'm so grateful. I am so grateful for these words, and I throw them out to the universe, knowing that they cannot be returned void, because what is done, what is made whole, is finished, complete, and I know this for you and myself and for the whole planet, and so it is.